Hi, and welcome to part 2. We're studying part 2 of muscles, and this is where we had stopped. We want to look at now that we know all about fascia, we want to know about muscle orientations. And they're going to look really different depending on the function that that muscle has to perform. So look at some of these pictures here. First, let's start with the one in the square. So in the big rectangle here, a muscle could be unipennate if it has, look at this. This is a tendon comes along one side and then everything branches from that one. So it's uni meaning one-sided. Bipennate, that muscle, that tendon's more in the center, and then we have branching out in two directions. So bipennate means branching in two separate directions. And then multipennate, where it's going to be branching in lots of different directions because you have lots of different tendons that are inserted in this muscle. Okay, so that's how they can fan out or not. And then some of the common shapes here. Biceps brachii. So your biceps has a belly in the middle, tendon on each side, on each end. So that's going to be fusiform. Parallel, your six-pack, rectus abdominis, right? They don't seem to converge on a tendon at the end, at either extremity. Instead, it has some tendons in the middle, but all the fibers are seemingly parallel. And then something like your pecs, pectoralis major, is going to converge on to just one region where it has that tendon. Okay, different from the fusiform here. And then you could have one that's perfectly circular. So these are going to have to do with the function of that particular muscle. It also matters how much strength it needs to generate, right? And what direction that pull is going to be. So let's look at it in the body. These are some really good examples. So circular around the mouth. You're going to have muscles that allow you to whistle, for example. Multipennate, where you have lots of tendons in the middle. Look at this, the deltoid, it's going to fan over your shoulder. If it's fanning over your shoulder, you're going to have lots of branches that go to different regions. Okay, another example here is a convergent, so pectoralis, and these are sort of fanning out here, yes, but all of them converging here on one tendon that's going to insert in the arm. How is that different from the multipennate? Multipennate is the one that has lots of sort of tendons that are in the middle that are going to have fanning muscles off. This doesn't. It has one tendon here and the fan is off just that one tendon. Biceps brachii is a fusiform. And then here we have an example of parallel. It's a muscle that you don't know yet, so I'm just going to leave it like that. We're gonna go to learn the sartorius later on. But just some examples, and you'll like how you have the unipennate and just some different examples of, depending on what action that muscle has to do, it's got to look a different shape, right? In order for it to work its best. No sense, you don't need to memorize all this now. I just want you to know the names and how they would work, but I'm not going to show you a picture like this and ask you, is this muscle bipennate or multipennate? And no, you're not memorizing that. Okay, we want to look at, and we're going to learn this later on when you learn all the muscles, is where do they attach? And that's going to be very important for you to understand what action that muscle can create in your body. It's all very well to know the name of it, but what does it do? Does it extend your leg? Does it flex your leg? What does it do? And in order to learn that, we kind of have to learn where it's going to and from. So let's think about that. If the fascia become tendons, as I told you, a place that they're going to attach, the tendon is going to connect to a bone, okay? And it's the contraction of that muscle that's going to move your skeleton. So if you think of Bonita that I have next to me here, you don't see her right now, but she's just a skeleton, but in order to move those bones, where would you, if you had a pretend bone, a pretend muscle, where would you stick it with tape from what section to what section in order for the contraction of that muscle to have a real movement? You see what I'm saying? How do you move all these bones in a coordinated manner? It's a miracle. It's incredible. Okay, tendons connect to bones, and we want to know which is the origin and which is the insertion. We want to know, in other words, where it begins and where it ends, right? Where does it start and where does it attach? And then if we contract it, it's going to move the skeleton. So if I have a muscle that goes over the knee, it's coming from my upper leg, my thigh, and it goes over the knee and I contract it, what's it going to do? Right? How is it going to move my lower leg? Think of that. Okay, so those are called origins and insertions, where they begin and where they end. Origins and insertions, O and I's. To define that, we would say that the origin is actually the less movable end of that muscle, the one that's going to move less, the one that's more sort of attached and not moving onto the bone that's not moving, and it tends to be more proximal. And the insertion is the one that's, like if it's your leg, it's the one that's kicking a ball, that's moving that skeleton. It's more movable and distal, right? Farther from its insertion. So we say that at contraction, when you shorten this muscle, you contract this muscle, the insertion moves towards the origin. Can you envision that? So right now, stretch out your right arm, let's say, and rest your forearm on the table. Do that. And now we're going to flex. You're going to bring your hand up towards your ear, right? So we have muscles in which at the contraction, the place that it is inserted, which is the more distal part, right? The one on the lower arm is the one that's more movable, right? The upper arm is not moving, even though there's a muscle attached on there. So you bringing up your palm towards your ear, it's the forearm that's moving more and is more distal. So let's look at this here in a diagram. So here you have your biceps brachii, and look where it's inserting. It's inserting on the humerus and also on the scapula. Okay, and then it's crossing this joint 1, and then it's crossing a second joint. Okay, so it's inserting here, and it's originating up in the shoulder. Now see if it makes more sense to say that the insertion is more movable. That end is more movable. Yeah, because when this muscle contracts, this is going to shoot up that way, right? And you're going to bring your hand up towards your ear. So this part is more movable. And what's happening at your shoulder when you bring your palm towards your ear? Well, not a whole lot. So this is less movable and more proximal. And this is more movable and more distal. Okay? All right, the actual origin, it has two origins because it has two tendons here. One is a supraglenoid tubercle. So it's above the glenoid fossa. We didn't really learn that one. That's one. And the other one is the coracoid process. Remember the one that looks like a crow? The coracoid process, and it's attached onto there. That's the origin. More proximal, less movable. The insertion is the radial tuberosity. Remember that bump on the radius here? The radial tuberosity. And that is more distal and more movable. And sometimes some books are now using the word just attachment. Instead of the origin and insertion, they say, oh, the proximal attachment and the distal attachment. But many places you'll still see the terms origin and insertion. Okay, this distinction of origin and insertion, I'm telling you, is not perfect. Oh no. So think of the quads. So we're thinking of quads here, right? Quads. And the action here is to kick a soccer ball. So he's going to kick it. He's going to kick this. And this muscle, the quads, are coming from the hip all the way down over to here. Okay, so is the hip the more movable part, or is this lower part here that's going to kick the ball more movable? This is going to be the more movable end, correct? This end is the more movable end. Okay, does that mean that works for all the quads? Well, now you have someone sitting down and you stand up. Stand up from sitting. And again, you have that muscle that's here, coming here and attaching onto here. Correct? Now, the more movable end is this end. Correct? This isn't really going anywhere, but this is making a big change in position. So, it's not perfect. We're going to move on to muscle activity. So let's stop this mini lecture here and continue on next time to the 5 golden rules of skeletal muscle activity. Thanks for watching, you guys. Bye-bye.